It's great to see you today. I want to talk about science. Science is one of the greatest gifts in human history. I certainly love it and am a beneficiary, but at the very same time, science has given many people a reason to push God out of the picture. How about you? Does science mean God is irrelevant for you? Does science mean that God is dead? My name's Paul Basin. I'm on one of the really big questions today, and the topic is, hasn't science disproved Christianity? For the record, I'm a fan of science. I've already said it. But I know you are too. Can you imagine having an ACL surgery without anesthesia? I've had 2 ACL surgeries on this goofy right knee of mine, and I cannot imagine no anesthesia. Has anyone you've ever known and loved had radiation or chemotherapy and their life was saved by it? Aren't you glad that computers exist, smartphones exist, and everything else like that? And while we love those things, many people think that because science is real, because it helps us in so many ways, because it seems to have kind of taken over and gotten rid of the mystery of life, therefore, that a personal God no longer exists. Well, as I address that question, I want to start with 2 basics. I think you'll agree with these. First off, science is not just one thing. Biology is one of the sciences. It studies our lives, human life. Zoology studies animal life. Geology, rocks and minerals. Botany, plants and trees. Astronomy, the solar system. You get the idea. There's not just one science. And then there's a second important thing to say, and that is that science has limits. All fields of science study the physical world. However, there's not one type of science, not one branch of science that I mentioned or that you can mention that can study non-physical materials. Like there's no branch of science that can study freedom or justice or love, and as you would expect me to say, or God. And there's a good reason for that. It's not because science is bad, it's because science uses a scientific method. The scientific method tests things. We're called to analyze physical things with our senses, what we can see, what we can smell, taste, etc. But there's no way that God can be tested or proved or disproved. So with those 2 basics in mind, I want to respond to this challenge for the day. Doesn't science disprove or at least contradict religion? Well, to begin, I want to channel my inner Peter Kreeft. Peter Kreeft, last name is spelled K-R-E-E-F-T, is a professor of philosophy at Boston College, and if you ever want to read anything by him, check it out. I bet he's got 100 books. I think all he does is he wakes up in the morning, has a thought, then writes a book. He's a genius. And here's what he says that helps me. I think it'll help you. We should beware of sweeping statements like science contradicts religion or disproves religion. Why? Well, because that's vague and it's actually not a very scientific statement. Because as soon as you make that statement that science contradicts religion, we immediately have to ask, well, which science? Okay, then which religion? Which idea in that particular religion do you think is disproved? And if so, is that idea that you believe is disproved, was it already a proven fact? And if so, what proves it? You see, if we're talking about Christianity, then we have to ask the question, which statement in the Bible is someone referring to that they believe science contradicts? And is that statement actually properly quoted? If it is it properly interpreted? Because the Bible, Holy Scripture from a Christian's perspective, is written. And so it has to be interpreted just like everything that's written has to be interpreted. So the number one issue today for science and Christianity, as you know, is the origin of the earth and the origin of humanity. Most scientists believe that the earth and that we humans came about very, very slowly and gradually, randomly even, through the process of naturalistic development. That is the idea that something came from nothing. I addressed that concept of whether or not something actually could even logically come from nothing in my talk on Does God Exist? You may want to check that out. In other words, this view says that there's simply nothing in the world that is beyond nature or supernatural. Christians, of course, believe that God is supernatural. Christians believe that God created the heavens and the earth. Now, how does that happen? Well, in Christianity, there are several ways, believe it or not, that can be approached. The first is that God created everything in 6 literal days. Absolutely no evolution. The earth is very, very young, in fact, just a few thousand years old. Another view that Christians have is that God created everything over millions and millions of years. He used evolution in the development of all non-humans, everything other than human, evolved. This is called microevolution. But God did directly create humans at some point in history. A third view that many Christians hold is that God created everything billions of years ago by means of evolution of all life forms, including the evolution of humans from proto-humans, which would be some form of apes. Now, here's the thing. That's called macro evolution. And in case you thought that was not ever believed by Christians, well, Dr. Francis Collins, who's executive director of the National Institute of Health and one of the finest Christian thinkers you'll ever run into, and by the way, he became a Christian in med school, believes that. And so does Sir John Polkinghorne, who is a Nobel Prize-winning physicist and one of the discoverer of a quark. I cannot tell you what a quark is. I can barely spell it. But I've read several of his books, and he believes in complete macroevolution from the beginning up until now. So here's my point. Creation can't be proved. Creation can't be disproved. There's no scientific test that can show evidence for it or evidence against it. So if you're looking for consistency in the design of the world, I would suggest you consider this thing called the fine-tuning of the earth, fine-tuning of the universe, fine-tuning of the human body. That is, that the earth is uniquely made for humans in a way that almost defies, I believe it completely defies, but for you, I hope it will almost and maybe finally defy the idea of just random natural selection. In fact, I have a talk on that called, I've mentioned it, Does God Exist? You might want to check it out because I deal specifically with what's called the Anthropic Principle. Now, when it comes to the origin of the earth and the origin of us humans, you don't have to really choose between science and Christianity. I don't have to. And I don't think you do either. All right, I hope I've stimulated your thinking. I hope it makes sense. I know I can't prove that science doesn't disprove Christianity. I hope I can make you realize or lead you to think that Christianity and science can very much co-inhere and coexist peacefully. Listen, thanks for watching. If you liked it, be sure and give it a thumbs up. For more content like this, click the subscribe button. You'll be notified when more videos on the really big questions release. And in the meantime, check out our channel. We've got all sorts of topics on marriage, sex, parenting, and more, because if it's important to you, it's important to us. Take care.